Hello again, it's Chibi Chibo, and this is another reading from In Sheep's Clothing by Kydois. Today we have Chapter 4, Rock Bottom. Then, a common misconception that many have about agelessness was that time mattered less as one got older. Commoners often came to the conclusion that just because our plans tended to span centuries, that we cared little about waiting. That each year that passed was somehow lesser for being a smaller percentage of our lives. They believed that the lives of mortals seemed to pass in the blink of an eye, so short were their lifespans compared to ours. Whoever thought of that must have had rocks for brains. I probably could have worded that differently, considering my current state, but it was one that fit nonetheless. With nothing to occupy my attention, time passed at an almost glacial pace. I watched as another boat drifted across the surface above me, casting me its expansive shadow. It was a rather droll activity, spending the last several decades watching boats. But out of the limited options I had, it was the only one even remotely interesting, and therefore the least likely to drive me insane. The other option was to brood on who I was and why I felt like wrapping my hooves around something's neck and throttling it until its eyeballs popped out of its contemptuous, treasonous, cowardly little face. This was generally followed by a lengthy bout of melancholy, in which I lament about my utter lack of hooves, due to the very simple fact that I was a rock. I was a very pretty rock. Whoever forced me into this blasted container certainly had style when they chose an immaculately polished, clean-cut, red barrel the size of a hoof for my prison. Still, it mattered little what I looked like since, at the end of the day, I was still stranded at the bottom of a bay. Thankfully, I did have an immediate connection with the magic of others. It was a quality of mine that I believed accompanied me from my past life, and I used it to siphon off the magic of the ponies above me, drawing in their energy to sustain me. From what I gathered, I tried to predict what manner of vessel was above me. It was a charming game born of my desperation for something to occupy my senses, and it was certainly better than wrestling with the whole identity question, coming out the other end twisted in a pretzel with a folding trail wrapped around my neck. That was not to say I learned nothing about my previous life. I deduced that I had been somewhat of importance. I had ruled at some point. Those under me had suffered adversity, but I managed to overcome it when something happened. Forget it. I spent too long racking my mind to waste time trying again. I turned my attention back to the drifting shadows above me. The current vessel was definitely on the larger side. It was packed with ponies with the occasional griffin. Their magic tasted of posh roses and summer dew. Probably a cruise liner, just returning from a week-long voyage to the more tropical regions. I remembered this exact vessel leaving before, though the flavor back then was much stronger, with a tangy citrus kick that generally signaled excitement. I was about to turn my attention to the next ship when my senses were flooded with a strong taste of creamy vanilla. It was a type of flavor that lasted, floating around one's mouth long after its source had decided to skip town for the express lane down the esophagus. It was a type of taste that I could really lose myself in, the kind I expect to accompany an intense spa session melting in the hooves of a skilled masseuse. It was the unmistakable taste of daydreams, and it was very, very close. Hope blossomed within the walls of my crystal prison, fueled by the flames of vengeance, and I clung on to it with the desperation of a drug addict. I may have been weak. There was only so much magic I could drain from where I sat. But what I had would have been enough to send a signal to my daydreaming target. I sent out a pulse from my being with as much magic as I dared to use. The water around me shuddered around my form before expanding outwards and crashing onto my daydreaming prey like a wave at high tide. The daydreaming stopped, and in its place was the alluring, peachy taste of curiosity. I felt the source wiggle its way towards me like a fish, slowly growing and growing until it all but filled my senses. I reached out with my magic, but despite its proximity, I was not yet visible. Where in Equestria was this? Oh, there you are! It must have taken centuries of careful self-control not to mentally shriek in surprise. Very carefully, I shifted my magic to properly visualize my ambusher, who peered at me over the edge of a cliff I was sitting on. There's a tad bit of panic when I realized that, ever since I woke up as a gemstone, I had literally been a step away from sinking down into an even drearier, totally pitch-black existence under the water. But I quickly quashed it. I had my pony salvation to address. Well, for certain definition of pony. What I could see was shaped like a pony for the most part, but she, and I was fairly certain it was a she, had long, webbed spines where her mane should be, transitioning from a shimmering magenta at the base to a flaming red-orange at the tips. There were fins behind her jaw, and on the back of her forehooves, and to top it all off, she was a bright, luminescent green. If I had eyes, they'd be burning at the lack of subtlety in her color scheme. She might have well been glowing, and I am not sure that was not already the case. It had been ages since I last saw a merpony. The last time they came from the watery home was a dark age for Equestria, though the ponies thankfully dealt with the problem before the damage could become unbearable. "Grr, you all right, pretty one you are," she said, poking at me with a hoof. I reeled from the contact, if it was even possible. "Remove your hoof from me, Mur," I found myself mentally broadcasting. Her eyes widened and she leaned away from me with a gasp. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly. "Was that you? I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, love." I settled back, mentally filing away my ability to communicate telepathically to another quirk of my past life. "You are pardoned for now," I thought to her, "but I must ask that you afford me the respect I deserve." She carefully sighted back closer, once again swapping back to wonder. "Ooh, are you important? What's your name?" The merparty suddenly gasped, pressing her hooves at her cheeks as she gushed. "Are you a heart gem?" "Oh, what?" I thought a little further. "And how do you know how to speak "A heart gem," she chirped, setting her hooves down in front of her as she was sitting at the table. "From the great crusade of song waivers?" I sat there silently for a moment. "Explain." "Well, see, a long time ago there were some real powerful mer who answered the calls of the heart gem. Their voices were the stuff of legend, powerful enough to charm any creature with a single note. And when they bound to the heart gems, they ventured up to the surface world, past the nets and the harpoons of the flesh-eating catbirds, where they brought enlightenment to the people of the surface." She paused there, scratching her head with a hoof. "The whole thing gets a bit fuzzy after that, but apparently the surface people weren't too receptive of the whole enlightenment business, so the song weavers kind of disappeared after that. The elders say they left the forsaken people of the surface to wallow in their heathenism to spread their song elsewhere." What? If I had eyes, I would be staring at her irridiculously. That was not exactly how I would describe the years of siren-induced destruction, infighting, and famine more than a millennia ago, but I suppose living at the bottom of an ocean does tend to color one's perceptions. "So, were you there?" she said, leaning in. "They told me the heart gems called out to the song weavers, but I never figured they actually talked." "I am quite certain I am no heart gem, Mer, and I refuse to be called such. I am no tool or some prophet of salvation. I am... I mentally kicked myself for flubbering at my triad. Nothing like a sudden introspection to ruin a perfectly fine self-righteous rant. The merpony gasped again. "Oh dear, we haven't even introduced ourselves, have we?" She gestured to herself grandly with a hoof, straightening up in what she must have thought was a regal pose. "My name's Lilywater, but you can call me Lily. What's your name?" I cleared my throat in a manner of speaking. "My name is of no real importance." "Oh, pish-posh, I got to call you something, don't I?" She set a wide grin on her face. I'm gonna name you Crystal." That has got to be the most unoriginal name I've ever heard. That's not a no. I could always call you Rocky if you prefer, Lilywater said, sitting there staring at me with a massive grin on her face. Just stick with Crystal. She scooped me up in a tight embrace, hugging me close to her scaly chest. Oh, Crystal, we're going to be the best of friends, you and I. I could do without the crushing intimacy, Mare. Oh, sorry about that. Say, I know it's a bit of an awkward question, but can I, bond with you? Absolutely not. Admittedly, I'd rather take being stuck with this insufferable merpony for a couple of decades over another day alone with my thoughts. But I'd rather not agree to this bonding nonsense in case it happens to be like one of those blood-pact agreements. Those never end well. And if I was how that whole siren fiasco started, it would probably end with me getting banished too. Lilywater's entire posture seemed to deflate. She looked at me with a forlorn expression. She seemed on the verge of tears, if that was even possible underwater, but how else can we go up to the surface? I blinked. Figuratively, of course. I completely forgot the whole reason I pinged her for the first place. I should not have let myself get carried away by her inane stories and whatever bull-headed dogma she was taught, however pitiful it was. This was my chance to finally go back up and take revenge on whoever did this to me. I let out a confident chuckle. Oh, you don't need to worry about that, Mur. I can take care of it, I said, putting a touch of allure into my voice. You will not need to bond with anything, much less me, to go to the surface. You're serious? Lilywater said with a sniffle. The other elders always said I would die if I tried going up there by myself. You'll be able to survive up there. I can help you take your first steps onto the surface. Trust me. This was partially true. She would have to be able to breathe air, but not because of anything I do. I used to have a merpony friend myself about half a century before the sirens started their age of famine over Equestria. He could breathe the both water perfectly fine. With how long-lived the merponies were and how little they changed, I doubted that even 1,000 years was enough to eradicate their amphibious nature. And even if I did, giving lungs to the Lilywater is no great obstacle for me. Other than that, all I had to do was give her another pair of hooves to get rid of that bothersome tail of hers, and she would be set. Cor, you're a real gem for doing this for me, Crystal, Lilywater said, keeping a tight hold of me as she swam her ways upwards. Their elders were certainly lying to them. I was certain there was a whole story around why Lily, of all merponies, was so eager to leave her people and her home for the surface. But that was the kind of worms I was not willing to open at the moment. Right now, I knew that if Lily could get me to the surface, I could go whatever I wanted, provided I pushed her a bit in the right direction. She seemed easy enough to manipulate, almost embarrassingly so. There's just one little sticking point that was bothering me. Where did you learn Equish, Mare? I assume you did not acquire it at the behest of your elders. Oh, I learned it from the dolphins. I've always wanted to go up, and I wanted to be prepared for when I did, so I asked them to teach me how to talk like the surface heathens. They even taught me how to ask for fish. And then she started shivering like a dolphin. Wait, hold on, stop. Dolphins know how to speak Equish. This explains so much. And there we go. That was chapter 4, Rock Bottom, of In Sheep's Clothing by Kydois. This has been Shibi Chabot with another fanfiction reading. Please comment, leave your questions, concerns, criticisms, what have you in the comments below. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure. Have a great evening.